Thank you very much, Congressman. With all due respect to our current representative, we'd be delighted to have you our voice in Washington. So thank you for those kind words. Chairman McDermott, members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in today's hearings. My name is Fred Wulczyn. I'm a research fellow at Chapin Hall, University of Chicago. And for the past 20 years or so, I've been involved in either designing waivers, evaluating waivers, or designing alternative finance proposals for child welfare systems. And I think from that historical perspective, I think it's fair to say that this is the most pressing problem facing the child welfare system today. So the opportunity to speak with you today is very welcome. In the brief time that I have, I'd like to address three basic questions. First, why are waivers important? That's been touched on already. I think it's important to be clear about the underlying problem, because that helps shape what we think we've learned from the evaluations of those waivers, and those waiver evaluations are very important. And then I'd like to touch very quickly on an overview of what we've learned, but I would encourage you to look at the waiver evaluations in more detail, because I think there's a lot to be learned in those details. It's one of the characteristics of the child welfare system is, like other human service systems, it's complex, and the devil indeed is in those details. So why are the waivers an important tool? Well, as you know, from time to time, federal regulations do prohibit innovation in social programs, and I think that's the case we have in child welfare. The underlying problem is that there's an imbalance between social policy, which favors keeping kids at home, and fiscal policy, which makes it easier to finance foster care. So we have this underlying tension, and you've heard it described from Congressman Kagi in Washington, Mr. Sheldon in Florida, and I'm sure you've heard it in other testimony, that states are innovating with respect to how they serve kids, and those innovations run counter to, clash with federal regulations with regard to the financing of the underlying system. So the waiver represents an opportunity to undo those tensions, and for that reason it's a very important solution that we should avail ourselves of. As you know, part of the waiver requirement is that they conduct evaluations, and I think there's a lot to be learned, as I said. So roughly 30 states have enjoyed the opportunity to do waivers. They are in various stages of completion. I think Florida, the final report on Florida and other states, California, that are recent recipients of the waiver authority, those final reports aren't due in yet, and with all due respect, I think it's important that we hear from the waiver evaluators in the final analysis. Most of the waivers target how long kids stay in foster care. Roughly 10 waivers have dealt in some way or another with subsidized guardianship, which is limited to kids who are already in foster care where the guardianship, where the reunification and adoption have been ruled out. So most of those effects are generated at keeping kids in care for shorter periods of time. There's a significant handful of waivers that deal more globally with flexible funding. In the case of California and Florida would be good examples of that. And then there are a number of waivers that deal with more specific problems like substance abuse, so on and so forth. The Chairman mentioned a number of those in his opening remarks. The waiver evaluations are at various stages of completion. At present, I would say that there are 4 that have produced findings that show positive results. 10 show no results or no positive results, but no negative results. And there is one state that had problems with poorer outcomes as a result of operating under the waiver, and suspended the waiver as a result. The 4 waivers, of the 4 states with positive waiver results, most of those are in subsidized guardianship. And again, the Chairman mentioned the importance of waivers with respect to establishing the importance of guardianship as a way to help kids achieve permanency. I think from the waiver evaluations, what we've learned is that they're difficult to mount. Flexible funding alone doesn't improve outcomes. It gives states the opportunity to purchase different services, but those purchase choices have to be wise. So we need better interventions, we need better management infrastructure, as I said, better purchasing decisions. Flexibility alone does not achieve that. Operationally, they're somewhat contrived. It could be said that in the past, the waivers have been driven by the research design as opposed to the requirements of operating a program. And as a consequence, we learn less about systemic or structural reform than we might otherwise. I think 2 important exceptions are California and Florida, because they're operating waivers for entire state populations. But the end result of that is we don't necessarily learn how to manage system-wide under circumstances of flexibility. In short, I think waivers are a necessary but not sufficient condition for structural reform in the child welfare system. And ultimately, the waiver idea is not a long-term solution for the structural problems that I alluded to at the outset. That is the imbalance between social policy, which favors keeping kids at home, shortening time in out-of-home care, and the way the system is financed. And finally, to the Chairman's opening remarks with respect to flexible solutions and the important problem of the entitlement, I think it is possible to solve the flexible funding problem and retain the entitlement in foster care. On all these matters, I'd be happy to talk to the committee at your desire. Thank you very much.